There's going to be some overlap here. I am focusing specifically on tall curtain wall buildings, the retrofit of tall curtain wall buildings, in a context of sustainability. So, you know, just really quick context, you know, this is I am a student of this kind of technology, and there's this sort of interesting departure of the building skin from the building structure that occurs in the mid-19th century. And, you know, it's not unprecedented. There's the frame and tent structures of some of the tribal societies and stuff that go way back. But, you know, this was an interesting development that is, you know, one step on the road to our current tall building technology. You know, another key step was the invention of the sort of post and beam framing systems by William Jenney that enabled the Chicago School of Architecture. And then the whole popularization of this emergent technology by Mies and his colleagues in envisioning what was to come. These beautiful models that went unbuilt of these highly transparent, tall glass structures, you know, in the early 1920s, which, you know, ultimately led to the glass skyscraper, as manifest in Lever House and Seagram Building in the 1950s, and then this whole technology then merged with these evolving technologies and materials that were coming on board. You know, it's interesting when you look at these things, the sort of push-pull that goes on in the industry. And for a long time, you know, it was really the industry that was pushing the design community. These materials, these lightweight materials, came on board, you know, early in the 20th century. They were there and ready to use. But even after the invention of the post and beam framing systems, it was another 2 or 3 decades of still using the heavy masonry infill materials before we really started to use these things. I think that interestingly, that's kind of reversed. And I think that now the design community is really pulling industry more because of the accelerating demands in architecture and the building skin. I think we are really beginning to pull industry now in terms of delivering higher performing materials, glazing materials, you know, this kind of. So in the 1960s, we had this massive boom in post-war architecture, redefined the skylines of our cities. You know, the thing was that, you know, this was brand new technology at the time. I mean, glass, you know, the current float glass process just came online in the early 1960s. So it was all enabled right there. It was exercised in the 60s hugely. And, you know, essentially, these things never did perform very well in the first place, you know. I work out of the Advanced Technology Studio up in Close, which we started up in 2009 in LA. And just recently, we opened one in New York City. So I spend half my time now in New York City. So I get to, you know, I walk around, you know, especially in New York City, this environment that is dominated by these buildings. Most of them are single glazed. And now there's a lot of them that are 40 years old and more. Never did work very good in the first place. A lot of them are in bad need of retrofit. So it's these kind of buildings that I'm looking at in particular. And like Paul referred to, you know, there aren't very many examples around of these kind of buildings that have been retrofit. So if any of you know of any of them, I will really love to hear about it. You know, we've seen this slide. I'm also, this really is from research that I'm doing. I've got a more than full-time job with you know, my enclosed work, but in my spare time, I'm pursuing a PhD in architecture at the University of Southern California. And the guy that heads the department there says that if he sees this slide, a slide like this, one more time, he's going to throw the students, you know, out of school. But, you know, I think it's important to look at this. I mean, you know, we went for a long time in the building industry without recognizing this. And of course, depending on where you get your statistics, the energy consumption of buildings varies between 40 and 50%. This is from Architecture 2030. You know, 76% of building energy comes from fossil fuels, 72% of electricity is consumed in buildings. Depending on where the building is on the East Coast, much of that electricity is generated by burning coal. This gets to be all very interesting as you lay it out. So in response to this, there's been a number of initiatives and this kind of thing that have grown up to try to deal with this. You know, and this is part of the whole code evolution, right? You have codes, standards, building rating systems and this kind of thing. And you sort of start with the rating systems and the initiatives, and it all kinds of evolves into new codes. But you know, this is the 2030 challenge, reaching carbon neutrality in the built environment by 2030. They do address also retrofits, but you know, most of the stuff, the thing that's really pretty amazing is, you know, you look at what's going on in this conference, and it is dominated by considerations relative to new building construction. And this, you know, this is really, it really does dominate, and it ignores the opportunity that is presented by the existing building stock. You know, these are more interesting statistics. You know, and I think Paul was talking about some of this, but in New York City, they have a great sustainability plan in place there, and they've identified that 85% of the buildings that currently exist in New York City will exist in 2030. So if we are to achieve these, you know, the White House agenda, the 2030 initiative, these kind of things, it's not going to be done without dealing with the existing building stock. And in fact, renovating, retrofitting the existing building stock is the fastest way for us to achieve these really important goals. So you know, another aspect of the retrofit opportunity is, you know, it is multidimensional. There are a lot of considerations. You know, these things get difficult to evaluate, and you know, Don is involved in life cycle analysis, which, you know, it's like when you're trying to evaluate these sustainability issues, it's really the only metric that makes any sense. So you start looking at the life cycle of these things, and you know, these kind of numbers become really meaningful. And in fact, when you add in the employee cost in a building, you're talking about design and construction costs that are down in the 2% range over the life cycle of the building, and yet, you know, we're all familiar with all the pressure that takes place during the design and construction phase to keep costs down, right? That are only 2% over the lifetime of that building. And the decisions are made, the decisions that are made during this part of the process impact the entire performance of the life cycle of that building. So, you know, there's some real fundamental things, I think, that need to be rethought. So, you know, we have seen, you know, in studying what has taken place in terms of retrofit of the building skin, motivation becomes a factor. Most of the stuff that has been done with no regard whatsoever to improving performance. It's been done for image, right? To make the building look better, to recast the image of the building, to bump it up from a grade C or grade B to a grade A building, this kind of thing. More recently, in probably the past 5 or 6 years, we've seen a lot of what are often referred to as energy retrofits in buildings. And those are typically about dealing with the low-hanging fruit, the mechanical systems, the lighting and controls. You get to the building envelope, and it's a tough sell. You know, and much less like what Paul was presenting were buildings that were actually vacated and you know, intervention at rather a massive scale on those buildings. And in a lot of cases, that is simply not possible. And you know, there's going to be a lot of cases, I'll tell you, in New York City where that would be a deal killer in terms of upgrading the performance of these buildings. So if we're going to do this, we need to do deep energy retrofits. Given the unfolding economic conditions, you know, and you know, I'm relatively new to this study of sustainability, and it's, you know, if you talk to people, we had a workshop yesterday on sustainability that was really interesting, and one of the telling things is there's nobody that's more confused and questioning about these issues of sustainability than the people that are studying it. It's like the ground is moving under your feet all the time. There's new concepts that emerge. The vocabulary is just terrible. We misuse the terms all the time. If I stand here and I talk to sustainability to an audience of people like this, it's kind of like talking about God. Everybody has a different concept of what that is. There's just there's a whole lot of work to be done within the sustainability realm. I mean, we've gone through, we've experienced the dot-com bubbles, we've experienced the housing bubble most recently. You know, there's other bubbles out there. I'll tell you, energy is a bubble. You know, we are living well into the bubble that started in the 19th century, the energy bubble. There's also the water bubble. These are big bubbles, and we're not sure, you know, when they're going to burst, but they are going to burst. Okay, so we need to take a quick look at these curtain wall systems. Most of you are probably familiar with this kind of stuff, but one of the things I want to point out is that, you know, that there's an evolution in this technology that took place. You know, the early systems that we did were called stick-built. So you put a vertical mullion in place, you put the horizontals, you put the glass in, and you basically fixed the glass in, and it was done. To take one of these things apart, you basically reverse the process, no problem. But in order to improve the efficiency of these things, what we did was we moved to unitized prefabricated systems, which is great. But what that involved is basically developing what we call a split mullion, right? You have to put a frame around each unit. And so you can see you can see what's happening there. You've got a split mullion. Well, all of a sudden, the disassembly of these things is really, really difficult. And you know, one of the things that this points to is the fact that these systems are not designed to be disassembled. Our buildings are not designed to be disassembled. This is one of the topics that came up in our sustainability workshop yesterday. This is the production process is essentially making these, putting these frames together and then glazing the infill materials into the frames. And this unitization process tremendously facilitates both the quality of the product and the speed of installation, which in markets like the United States, where you've got guys on the building site making $100 an hour, it becomes a major cost benefit to be able to speed the installation. So what I'm doing is looking at the full spectrum of the retrofit process. And one of the first things that you identify is that this process is fundamentally different than new construction. For example, and it's a very large and elaborate process. I'm going to look at just a couple of issues here. But you have the building survey, the probes. I mean, the first thing you have to do as part of this process is figure out what you have. And one of the problems is that our building stock is made up of custom applications. Every building is custom, even when you're talking about similar building typologies. So what you got to get out there on sites. You got to cut things up, do probes to figure out what exactly you have. And then, in the preliminary program definition, one of the things that you have to do is define the goals for design service life and this kind of thing. And I'll talk about this a little bit more in a second. But I want to talk a little bit about the RECLAD strategies that I've sort of identified as typologies for doing a RECLAD on a building. And, I think, unfortunately, the most common one that we find today is that the facade system is just entirely stripped off the building structure and then a new system is put on. From a sustainability standpoint, this fails to use one of the primary sustainable strategies, which is reuse. Now, there's a lot of reasons that this may, in fact, be the best or the only solution, but a lot of times it's a result of us not looking at the full spectrum of impacts that occur from these activities. One of the projects that we're involved in right now is the Javits Convention Center. This is it was originally a pay project. It was done in the mid-'80s. Okay, so you can see here this is the old system on the left and the new system on the right. this speaks to what Don was talking about, a really important aspect of our building systems, of our buildings, and the way that we measure and plan them going forward is the durability. And you can see from some of the stuff that I'll show you that you know, this is a problem. One of the things that we have a big problem with is glass. And I was really surprised after spending about 30 years of building highly transparent structures, all glass, to discover that architectural glass is not recycled. It is occasionally downcycled, ground up and used as asphalt fill, this kind of thing. But more often than not, it's landfilled. And in the US, we have 10,000 landfills already. And if we end up stripping all the glass off of all those downtown buildings in New York City and landfilling that material, intuitively, it does not seem like a sustainable practice. And it's interesting what we've done. This whole thing of high performance materials, I think there's a lot of questions that need to be asked here. What we've done, in responding to the weaknesses of glass as a material, we've added coatings, we've insulated, we've laminated, we take, all of these things that make the glass perform better. And we've taken this remarkable material that has these sort of phenomenal attributes, transparency being, the most predominant probably. But the other thing is you can put that glass in the building envelope and it's good for hundreds of years. It's good until somebody breaks it. We used to think that it melted, but that, that was, proven to be fallacious. And, but what we've done is we've taken that material and in the process of making it a high performance material, we've collapsed that durability down from hundreds of years to, in the case of an IGU, 25 years or so. This is, to give you an idea of what's involved in complexity in some of these things. What drives most of these retrofit exercises is keeping the building operational throughout the renovation cycle. And that, even more than cost, tends to drive the methods. So what you see here, this is, if you're familiar with this is in the Crystal Palace part of the structure. To keep this open, they basically built a secondary structure inside. So you've got, these are actually work platforms for the guys above. And this is scaffolding up on top. So this is that work platform, scaffolding on top, an actual forest of scaffolding to get up to the envelope enclosure. The entryways here are boxed off so that you've got enclosure on the inside so the guys can work on the exterior. This is a new portal frame system, and this one is just being worked on in the back. The structural system in this case it's a very unique building. It's a space frame structure, and this is the new curtain wall system supported off the space frame. But this is the condition of some of this glass, which was, in this case, almost 30 years old, not quite 30 years old. This is in a spandrel area, so you can see that there was a large area where this was characteristic, where the coating is just peeling off. But there was extensive areas where the glass was clouded. You can sort of see here that the finish on the exterior aluminum is not, it's chalked, it's not in particularly great shape. You can also see some of the distortion that's characteristic of this highly reflective glass that was used a lot more extensively back in those days than it is used now. So this is the old system here, and the new system is right here on the right-hand side. So you can see that the new system is less reflective. We've also doubled the module. An interior view, so the new system is here. And you can see the difference in transparency. At the same time, you've got better performance because of those low E coatings that make the glass not recyclable. Okay, so the next strategy is a RECLAD strategy, and this is simply replacing the infill materials, which in this case would be the glass material. And there are reasons other than there are other reasons than material going bad to replace it, right? I mean, glass is a very dynamic material, And the glazings that we have today are significantly better performing than they were 25 years ago. So that in itself can be a reason to plan on wanting to change the glass infill materials on a 20-year basis or a 25-year basis or whatever. The thing is that, that we're not doing that. We're not doing that planning. We haven't planned. I know of no facade system to date, no curtain wall system, including the systems that we see being built around us that are being designed in anticipation of retrofitting these infill materials. This is not a curtain wall building, obviously. The Empire State Building did do something. I haven't seen a curtain wall building that has just been treated, with a sort of a reclad. The windows were replaced in the Empire State Building. Overclad is another strategy, and this was done at 3 Columbus Circle in New York. Very controversial. So they basically covered a masonry facade with a curtain wall system. And the next sort of strategy that I look at is what I call a double skin. And the difference between the two is largely that in a double skin strategy, you would really use the cavity that's created by the second skin as part of the building system, at least as a thermal barrier and maybe part of the ventilation system and this kind of thing. This is a Rodino Federal Building, and I believe that this was the original concept. I believe it was changed in execution, but you can see basically they're building an additional structure at rooftop, and they're suspending a secondary curtain wall system to create a second skin for the system. So, the other part of the retrofit process that I think is really critical is it has to do with how do you deliver these things in a manner that mitigates disruption to ongoing building operations. And like I said, this is what really makes this whole process so much different than new building construction. If you can do the kind of projects that Paul showed, where you really can shut down the building and basically go after it and treat it like a new building construction, that's entirely different. When you have to keep the thing operational, and most of the ones that we've been involved, that has been the case, it really makes a whole different animal out of the thing. UN headquarters is just the Secretariat building is just finishing up a reclad. And you can see some of the techniques that were reused for material handling here. And what they did was actually they took strips. So the building is operational. They would clear out blocks of floors, and they would do the retrofit, and on those floors move back in and then take another block of floors. There's a number of different strategies for dealing with this kind of problem. You can see the new glass here, the old glass here. So again, it's a less reflective material, but a higher performance material. So, the questions, ultimately, involve not just the facade, but the tall building itself. And, we spent a lot of time in our sustainability workshop yesterday talking about are tall buildings sustainable? Do they cost more? What drives sustainability? What drives the cost? Ultimately, economic considerations tend to dominate, right? And if we're going to bring sustainability to our buildings, one of the things that we need to do is get beyond evaluating these things on the basis of first cost and on the basis of 3-year or 5-year payback. And the kind of work that Don is doing in life cycle analysis is critical. It's really the only way to evaluate these kinds of considerations. And yeah, there's not a lot of demand for it now. Nobody wants to do it. It's probably not going to happen until it's legislated. Personally, I feel like, like in the work that I've been doing and looking at some of the stuff that's related to what Don was showing, durability in the building facade, my personal feeling is that we shouldn't be looking at just 100 years. I think we should be designing our buildings for 1,000 years. And I do believe that at some point, that sounds crazy, right? Just like using raw float glass in the building envelope sounds crazy. But I think at some point we have to start saying, if we can't recycle it, we can't use it. And equally, we have to say at some point, we have to change the way that we're thinking about, the longevity of our building stock. you know, everybody likes to do a little lead bashing. You know, I'm a lead AP, but I can bash with the best of them. But I think one of the things that's interesting here, this is right off the USGBC website. You know, this is zero impact line. And what they're showing, and here's where we are right here. So, you know, here is the scale right now for the lead scale. Here's, you know, here's where we are at right now. Here's where we're going, and here's where they see it in the future. This is zero impact. So, you know, it's, you know, what this tells you is that a lot of these building rating systems really aren't ultimately about sustainability. It doesn't mean they don't have any purpose, but they're not really measuring true sustainability. So, you know, this whole thing about design service life, I mean, you know, when I call up Viricon to ask them what is the design service life of an IGU, the answer I get is, well, it's warranted for 5 years, you know, or 10 years or whatever it is, which is not the same issue, right? You know, I talk to architects all the time, and it amazes me. You know, I always ask this question: what did you design? What do you typically design your buildings for? You know, in terms of service life, and most of the time, that's not an issue that is specifically addressed as part of the building program. So, you know, I think that there are a number of things that we can gain from anticipating retrofit. You know, there's a couple things that we can safely identify as reality. Tall buildings currently under construction will live into the next century and beyond. The average lifespan for a building in the U.S. is 79 years. That's all 5 million buildings in the commercial marketplace. Certainly tall buildings, you know, will live to be beyond that. And the facade systems will not. So we know that those facade systems are going to have to be renovated. We know that the glazing materials are probably going to have to be renovated as a part of that program. So, you know, in conclusion, I think retrofit is an infrastructure problem that needs to be dealt with at the same level that we need to deal with the roads and bridges and this kind of thing, which is in the U.S. is a particularly bad problem. It's imperative for us to speed up the process of facade retrofit if we're really serious about achieving these initiatives that we've established. And I don't think that's going to happen without some significant incentives and legislation to go along that requires these things to happen. There's a massive looming need. It's a tremendous commercial opportunity. But, you know, the reality is that unless we utilize green practices, we're going to really miss a big opportunity. Durability needs to be a fundamental strategy. We need to match up the life expectancy of the assemblies that make up our systems in building. Current design practices don't do this. And new tall building markets certainly present an opportunity to, you know, to make this happen. Thank you.